Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is a delight to welcome you to the White House. My name is Jay Hine. I direct the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, and you are the leaders that get that done. And so it is our honor to be in your company, because in your mix today, and these seats are leaders of the Faith-Based and Community Initiative as it applies to education. We have education reformers that care about policy, that care about administration and governance, and that care about advocacy and new and better ways to do things, innovators. We have teachers, and we have others who care so much more about doing better on behalf of the students who come to school hoping to learn and to prepare for a healthy life. And that's what this series of Compassion in Action Roundtables is intended to elevate, that type of conversation. Our initiative has often been described as a debate between church and state and other kind of abstract funding or policy questions, and those are important considerations in our work. But the reason we exist, in the President's words, is to be a determined attack on need, to do better on behalf of the most vulnerable among us and the most distressed parts of our society, which is both at home and abroad. It's why we were put in action, and it's who we are. And so this Compassion in Action Roundtable series every month takes on a different problem that we care a whole lot about, indeed that we're burdened by. When 1 million children die of malaria in sub-Saharan Africa, of preventable and treatable disease, malaria, we think that's unacceptable. We think that we could do better. And so we have a roundtable that says that point and that attaches to that very serious societal issue the hope that comes from faith-based and community groups that are meeting those needs and creating a new and better way to do that business, to prevent and treat disease. We've done similar sessions on a wide range of public policy issues, and we'll do so every month that this administration is in office. There's no more important issue, though, than education. When graduation in a New York City high school is a 50-50 proposition, 1/3 of our students now, roughly speaking, drop out of high school. That is not good for those individuals. That is terrible for their families and their communities and our nation that hopes to be a competitive and healthy nation. And so we get to put a stake in the ground today, and we get to say unacceptable. That's not right, and that's not good. So what's our solution? We can agree to care about that, but how do we turn it around? Well, research shows that alternative education providers, public schools working in partnership, charters or private school providers, and the mix of community solutions offer a pathway. And the wider that we can extend those solutions suggests that the more overaged and undercredited students who've escaped too many years of education can be maybe caught before it's too late. And earlier on in a student's experience, maybe we can give them the skills necessary to be productive and effective students. That's what you leaders in this room do. Before I was at the White House, was a researcher at a think tank, and one of the projects that I looked at, we studied a variety of community-based solutions on health, welfare, and crime. And one of the projects we studied was in Springfield, Ohio. It was called the Churches of Springfield Project, and they were interested in finding out how they might be more valuable citizens in their community. What would it look like if the faith community escaped the four walls of their congregations more effectively and embedded their people and their talent and their dollars into neighborhoods, and while they had a heart for that, they had no knowledge on how to do that. So they had a series of meetings, and they invited the city leaders to come and talk to them, to train them and educate them on what the needs of the city were, and they talked to education officials and others throughout the city. But the sheriff really got them, because the sheriff said, well, I'll just tell you that when we're within the correction system planning how many beds we're going to need at the prisons down the road, we just count how many fourth graders can't read. And the church found their project, and they thought, let's make sure fewer, if any, fourth graders in our city at least can't read. Let's teach them how to read. And so they created a tutoring program, and then those churches working alongside the schools created other options to maintain the schools and provide support, because they were in a relationship now. You know, they were burdened by something bigger than their individual interests, and they were aligned to a specific goal. And then they just figured a whole bunch of ways on how to do work more effectively together. inspiring example and illustrative of the success so many of you represent. But let me first, now as we move into the program, thank Secretary Spellings at the Department of Education and her staff that are here for their leadership on these themes and for helping us plan and convene today's event. Sham Minion, where are you, Sham? You need to wave. And there he is, directs the Faith-Based and Community Initiative at the Education Department. Your team is here with you, and you worked with Elizabeth Wiebe, who led our team in preparing today's event. You have gathered an important set of people and prepared for us a remarkable program. We're all in for a big treat today. The department, of course, is in the process of a set of activities surrounding reauthorization of No Child Left Behind. That garners a fair bit of print in the newspaper. We're not going to talk about all those particulars today about NCLB, but we are going to talk about the heart of the President's education reform agenda. And that is that we must ensure that every single child in America receives a better education. And two leading ideas that the President and the Secretary and education leaders within our administration have advanced to close that education gap is the power of the idea of choice and the power of the idea of supplemental education services to catch those who are trapped in failing systems. And our three panels today will address those two big ideas. And the first panel will be led by Morgan Brown. Can you wave, Morgan? You're going to be up in a minute. You're a terrific leader as Assistant Deputy Secretary of the Office of Innovation and Improvement at the Department. Morgan is the top educational official advancing these choice strategies, and his panel will present important insights into the Supplemental Education Services Program, with a subject our keynote speaker will address as well. The second panel will be led by Charles Hokeson. Is Charles with us? There you are, thank you. President Alliance for Choice, who serves as, and his panel will discuss the powerful results that can be achieved when we give parents, empower parents to select the pathway of education that their child needs and deserves. And our third panel will give us a full angle view of a local success story that has significant national implications. Virginia Gentles, nice to have you with us, leads non-public education policy at the department. And she'll lead and facilitate a conversation with the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program officials that has transformed our city in education, the education environment, the education opportunities available to youth in this city, and indeed has provided us a national model worth replicating, which NCLB has a word or two to say about. But before we get into those panels, I did recognize that you're in a company of other leaders, and one other such leader is with us, Tom Lewis. If you could wave, Tom. So many know you here. You and your daughter Tisha are here today. We're so pleased to have you. Tom, of course, is the founder of the Fishing School, which is an after-school program, provides so many other services for at-risk youth in the city and in the same distressed and troubled neighborhoods that he patrolled as a police officer, and now is so valuably investing in the lives of so many children. We're just delighted to be in your company and to have you here. Someone else thought Tom Lewis was doing a good job and thought it's worth seeing firsthand, and so on the 9th day of his presidency, George W. Bush went to the fishing school in Washington, and he got a firsthand look at the work that was done there and met the students and the children, and he also announced the job I hold and the office, the work that my team is about every day, that he announced the faith-based and community initiatives. Not in concept, that had been discussed on the campaign, but in particular, what are we going to do? He announced specific ideas. And so, Tom, I am delighted to tell you today that we've put those ideas into action. Today we're going to talk about 2,700 new private education providers, many of them faith-based, assisting youth trapped in these failing systems. When we talk about the SES program, that is a new reality. Today we'll also celebrate the fact that 57,000 children of prisoners are matched with a loving, caring adult mentor who are investing in their lives, which means, by the way, that there's 57,000 adults giving of their time and their energy and their homes and their social networks to help those children. We're on our way to 100,000 matches before this administration's done. It's a promise he made at your school, and so pleased with its promise we're working so hard to fulfill. He also announced the Compassion Capital Fund, which has now provided grants to over 4,000 small grassroots organizations that had no experience working with the federal government before. And I could go on, but it's not about the initiative broadly that we're here today. I just wanted to acknowledge you and to say that what the president put in motion is being worked out. It's not the headlines that we read about or the stories necessarily, the narrative that you hear about with the Faith-Based and Community Initiative, but as I led with, it's why we exist and it's how our success will be measured. The president said at the fishing schools, the change we seek won't come at all at once, neither by an act of Congress or an executive order. Real change happens street by street, heart by heart, soul by soul, and one conscience at a time. One leader that knows that very well will lead us off today, and he is a church leader, he's an education leader, and he's a community leader. His name is Bishop William Laurie, our keynote speaker, who is revolutionizing his community by investing in education solutions. It's my privilege not only to introduce him, but to welcome him back to the city where he lived so many years. He faithfully served this city and the church, and he faithfully studied here. You did faithfully study here, didn't you, when you were, okay. When you were a student, and you were also a leader that helped bring into motion the Washington Center City Consortium of Schools, a legacy that we'll be celebrating today. You are one of the sharpest and most aggressive bishops in education reform generally. You have done so much to advance the cause within the church. You've helped so many of your other peers understand the necessary solutions that we must advance, and we're in your debt for that. You are now Bishop, of course, of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and your diocese schools have been certified as SES providers. You'll be talking about that today, I'm sure. And I'll refer each of you to your programs to read the other impressive credentials the Bishop brings to us. He's held so many important leadership positions at home and nationally. He's received a presidential commission, and he has a heart for this work that is unparalleled. And so it is my honor to welcome you to the podium, Bishop Laurie.
Jay, thank you very, very much, and I'm certainly honored to be here among you today, and want to begin by expressing my appreciation for the wonderful work of the faith-based and community services of yourself and your predecessor, such a wonderful relationship that has developed. Also like to, I see Jack Klink here and many that I've come to know in the Department of Education. I'd certainly like to offer my special greetings and my thanks for the relationship that has been developing over the years. And I'd like to address all of you as colleagues and fellow citizens and as friends. I'm most grateful for this opportunity to speak at this Compassion in Action Roundtable, and to have the opportunity also to speak about initiatives which Catholic schools in the Diocese of Bridgeport and beyond are taking to educate effectively the young people in our inner cities in such a way as to help close the achievement gap. I do not stand before you as a professional educator. Rather, I am a pastor of souls who, with the Catholic Church in the United States and many other religious and private groups, firmly believes in the goodness and gifts of our young people, and firmly believes that Catholic schools, private schools, and other religious schools have a vital role to play in helping succeeding generations of children to realize their potential and to participate as enlightened members of our democracy. I certainly do want to thank the Department of Education for the warm relationship that has developed not only with the Diocese of Bridgeport, but also with the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. In fact, this morning I knew I was coming down here. I happened to be with Bishop McManus, who chairs the Education Committee, and I thought I better check in with him so we'd all be singing off the same page of chant, and we are. And certainly I would like to thank the Department of Education for involving us in the SES program, which I'll talk about in a minute. Since I'm not a professional educator, I did bring along with me the professionals from the diocese, one of whom is Dr. Margaret Dames, the superintendent of schools, and maybe you should give us a wave, Margaret, if you would. And the other being John Cook, who is the deputy superintendent of schools and who oversees the SES program in the diocese. And if things get too technical, I'll refer things to them. You've asked me to address three things. The Cathedral Cluster, which is the grouping of Catholic schools that serve inner city Bridgeport. And since I brought this idea to Connecticut from my years in Washington, you asked me to say a word about the Center City Consortium of Catholic schools here in the local Archdiocese of Washington, but with Chris Kelly being here, we have the resident, not only the expert, but the man who is actually responsible for that, so I'll tread lightly. And secondly, I guess you'd probably like to know how we fund our schools, and I'd like to discuss that in the context of school choice. And then thirdly, the diocese is the only Catholic system to date to be named an SES provider, Supplemental Education Services provider, by the U.S. Department of Education. I'd like to share a little bit about how that has gone in the last 2 years. And all these 3 points are going to be woven in everything I'll be saying for the next couple of minutes. The Diocese of Bridgeport, which encompasses all of Fairfield County in southwestern Connecticut, was established only in 1953, but Catholicism has existed in Connecticut much longer, dating back to the 17th century. The cathedral parish, St. Augustine, was built around 1864, and the school dates from the 1880s, just recently renovated and reopened. The other schools in the cluster were built in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, and you would know that if you took a look at them. At one time, Bridgeport was a great manufacturing center for automobiles, sewing machines, guns, appliances, and yes, even dictaphones. And all of this peaked in World War II, and after a protracted period of decline, I guess I would say that Bridgeport is struggling toward a renaissance. And so you have now labeled me an optimist, and I plead guilty to being bullish on Bridgeport. In the meantime, the several Catholic high schools and numerous grade schools that had once dotted the entire city of Bridgeport have been reduced to 7. The diocese operates the only Catholic inner city high school in Connecticut, Colby Cathedral High School, where last year 100% of the graduating class went to college. The diocese also operates 6 wonderful elementary schools, serving about 1,500 families. And in the entire diocese, there are 40 Catholic schools serving a little over 12,000 students and their families. Well, when I arrived in the Diocese of Bridgeport in 2001, I found that enrollment was declining in most Catholic schools in the diocese, but the drop-off was particularly alarming in our inner city Catholic schools. And one pastor said to me, I didn't even know where the parking lot was, I was so new, and he said to me, "Bishop, if you don't do something, you're going to lose all those schools in the city." And I wasn't about to let that happen. So I drew on the example of my old boss and mentor, James Cardinal Hickey, who was Archbishop here in Washington from 1980 until the beginning of 2001. he faced the same problem on a bigger scale back in the 90s, and His Eminence, in a show of great leadership, rejected advice to close and/or consolidate struggling inner-city schools, and instead launched the Center City Consortium of Catholic Schools under the dynamic leadership of Mary Ann Stanton, and now under Chris Kelly. With the leadership of the Cardinal and the backing of donors, she founded a mini-system within the larger Catholic system geared to the special needs of the Center City and its children. She focused on the basics of education, on the condition of the buildings, and on the quality of the school's leadership. She rousted up, as Chris I know is still doing, donors from every part of the metropolitan area, and she garnered the support both of former Mayor Anthony Williams and also the Congress, which included the consortium in a school choice provision that President Bush signed into law. Now, as you know, the legislative future of that initiative is, at best, endangered. This, of course, is no longer directly my business as I've moved on to Connecticut. But as I've looked at these 6 precious schools in Bridgeport, Circa 2002, endangered because of failing finances, low enrollment, old buildings, and the burnout that can so easily affect inner city educators, I naturally thought of my previous experience here in Washington. And so I asked myself the question, why can't a consortium model happen right here in Bridgeport? And then 2 people providentially came into my life. It really is all about leadership. The first in order of appearance is someone named Mrs. Madeline Lacavara, and the second is Dr. Margaret Dames, our superintendent since the year 2003, known affectionately in Southern Connecticut as Dynamo Dames. In 2001, when I started serving in Bridgeport, Madeline Lacavara, a parishioner at St. Aloysius in New Canaan, Connecticut, was running a not-for-profit organization in New York City called Education, Inc., that provides services and strategies for urban schools, both public and private. I told Madeline what I wanted to do, secured her support, and when I found out that she was retiring from Education, Inc., I managed, with God's help, to recruit her to form and oversee the Cathedral Cluster, which is my version of the Center City Consortium up in Bridgeport. And it includes the 6 schools of St. Augustine's, St. Raphael's, St. Peter's, St. Anne's, St. Andrew's, and St. Ambrose. I figured with patron saints like that, it would be hard to go wrong. Soon thereafter, the diocese recruited Dr. Dames as the new superintendent. She responded, dare I say it, to an ad in the New York Times. And the minute my search team met her, they knew it was the best possible fit, and so did I. Dr. Dames has brought stellar experience from both private and public education, including curriculum mapping, leadership training for principals, technological advances, staffing and finance models, marketing plans, and other improvements designed to help our schools make the leap, as Jim Collins would say, from good to great. And within just a few short years after her arrival, all the schools in the Diocese of Bridgeport have been reorganized, the enrollment losses have stopped, and I believe we are poised for a general renaissance of Catholic education across Fairfield County. But back to the inner city schools, Bridgeport, circa 2003, and the creation of that system within the system that has proved to be a change agent for all of our schools, including the schools in the more affluent parts of the diocese. Borrowing from New York and Washington, I worked with Madeline and Margaret to recruit a strong board to oversee these 6 schools, which are primary feeders for our inner city high school, Colby Cathedral. The chair of that board is Larry Bossidy, formerly of GE and formerly the CEO of Honeywell and Allied Signal. I figured if he could run those things, he could probably run these 6 schools. And it includes other business leaders, such as the CEO of Price Waterhouse, an executive from Pitney Bowes, and many other business leaders, educators, marketers, parents, and benefactors. The board has initiated some innovations. Faced with declining enrollment, Larry Bossidy realized that the tuitions, which back then were at about $3,500 a year, were well beyond the reach for many parents who are just at or below or above the poverty line. And so the board elected to slash tuition to a breathtaking $2,500, even though the cost of educating a child in our city schools runs about $5,200, or about $5,000 less than the public schools in the city. To make up the difference, the Cathedral Cluster relies on the wonderful support our urban schools have received from something called the Inner City Foundation for Charity and Education. It's been operating since 1992. Without this organization, I'm pretty sure we would have had to close many of these schools already in the 90s. Other foundations continue to exist, including the Calder Foundation, the Pitt Foundation, the Children's Scholarship Fund, and others. We're also beginning to garner corporate support from General Electric and Pitney Bowes and other corporations headquartered in Fairfield County. GE support is being received in conjunction with a cooperative relationship that is beginning to form between the cluster and the Bridgeport City Schools. Beyond that, the board recommended the formation of a patrons program who are major benefactors that provide all kinds of structural improvements to our schools, technology, and the like. We've also launched the Angel Aid Scholarship Program, where we ask benefactors to earn their wings by giving a $5,000 scholarship to one or more students. I tell them to pretend they still have a couple kids in school, and they can do that. And of course, we're going to have to do a major capital campaign in order to make sure that these schools survive long term. I know I'm seeing the big zero. Does that mean it's time to leave? Let me just finish up very quickly here. The board also directed that we do a marketing campaign. Our enrollment is up 12% over the last 2 years. We have 200 more places to fill. I do have Angel Aid scholars standing in line looking for donors, and I'm pretty confident we can do it. Test scores are up. I would just want to tell you that we are above the 70th percentile in reading and math. I would just want to tell you that in our high schools, we compare more than favorably with all of the local high schools that they are compared with. 98%, 99% of our kids graduate from high school. On average, 98% go to college. We take the Iowa Mastery Test, which is pretty tough, and it's norm referenced, and we're pretty proud of our kids. All of these improvements are due to new energy and training of principals and teachers, a strategic plan to involve the parents as much as possible, greater attention to curricula and to programs that creatively address the learning deficits of many urban youngsters. I would also say that the religious atmosphere in our schools helps contribute to the learning atmosphere, and the schools are very diverse. Certainly Catholics and Protestants and evangelicals and Muslims and kids with no religious background at all. But I would give most of the credit to the kids and to their parents. Eager to learn, they sense opportunity is knocking. If I could just say that we are hoping against hope that as No Child Left Behind is re-upped, if it is re-upped, we are hoping that the Washington Opportunity Scholarships will maintain themselves. We'd like to think that a place like Bridgeport might be another terrific place for a demonstration site. We also would like a lot of support in the area of tax credit tuitions for corporations. I think that's a good plan, and it sometimes avoids some of the energy you get around vouchers. We are involved in the SES program. The diocese is the first Catholic school system to be involved in this. I think there are now others. In the previous school year, we served about 50 students. Public school funds compensated our Catholic school teachers. They did tutoring in math and reading primarily. And I think that this program has a lot of advantages. First of all, the kids who came to it really benefited from it. I think it's a genuine service our schools are performing for the public schools. Secondly, we do get some money to our Catholic schools from the SES program, although we do have to pursue it rather doggedly because it comes through the State Department of Education, but we're getting smarter in that score. And then I'd say the third thing is that it gives parents the thought that maybe after all there are some alternatives out there that might be within their reach. Kind of gives them, it broadens their imagination about what might be possible for their own kids. And we have some things to learn about it, but on the whole, I would just want to stand here and say we're very satisfied with our SES experience. And I thank John Cook, who dogs it, visiting the schools and holding up the sign, advertising it, does everything but walk around with a sandwich board. And he's causing it to succeed. Let me just conclude by thanking you. I'm sorry I overstayed my welcome at the microphone here, but I just want, once I get started on this, it's very hard to stop me. I'm very excited about these initiatives, very excited about the opportunities that we've been given, and I hope that our experience will be helpful to all of you as we seek to greater partnering between the public and private schools and greater educational choices for parents and their children. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go ahead and ask the first panel to come up as I'm setting the stage and introducing them. Bishop Laurie, thanks again for your remarks and for showing what a positive impact you can have in a community with some leadership on education reform. Again, my name is Morgan Brown. I'm the Assistant Deputy Secretary for the Office of Innovation and Improvement at the U.S. Department of Education. As Jay mentioned, our office, one of its primary purposes is to advocate for the benefits of school choice and education options for children and their families. And we're the key office that is focusing on assistance and outreach for the public school choice options and the tutoring options, which we call supplemental education services, that are available under No Child Left Behind. we feel there's been, we see a steady increase in the number of students who are now accessing tutoring options under NCLB, and it's up to about 500,000 children in the 2005-2006 school year. So that's very positive. But on the other side, we see that that's only about 1/5 or a little less than 1/5 of the children that are eligible across the country. So there's certainly a need to make much greater progress in addressing this issue. And so lately, the Secretary has really taken a lead in investing a lot of time and energy at the department into doing more on the outreach side to families across this country. And not surprisingly, while we've been engaged in those efforts, we've found that in communities where faith-based or community organizations are involved, either on the outreach side in terms of helping families know about these options, these tutoring options, and helping them learn how to easily enroll and access those options, but even more importantly, as tutoring providers themselves, where we see that happening in the community, we see much better implementation and higher percentage rates of eligible students participating in the tutoring options under No Child Left Behind. We have a great panel today to go into that in a little bit more depth. First, we're going to hear from Dr. Matthew Harris, who's co-founder and chief executive officer of Project Impact based in the Los Angeles area. And he started Project Impact 16 years ago when he recognized the need for people of principle to get involved in saving the lives of our youth and our families, in both in terms of education and other needs. He's built Project Impact into a nationally recognized model service provider. And prior to founding Project Impact, Dr. Harris was pastor of First Christian Church of Linwood, California. And he'll talk more about this, but Project Impact has been approved by the State Department of Education in California to serve students with tutoring in the past, initially in Los Angeles, and now, and he'll talk about this, they're looking to expand statewide in their services to children in California. We're also going to hear from Ms. Eileen Dowd, Executive Director of Mrs. Dowd's Teaching Service. She has 30 years of experience in teaching and childcare, starting out as a teacher in the Cleveland Public Schools in the 1970s. And most recently, in 1994, Mrs. Dowd founded Harbor International, a consulting firm serving clients in the fields of childcare, education, and small business development. And then in 2002, Mrs. Dowd created a faith-based tutoring company called Mrs. Dowd's Teaching Service, which has been awarded and approved as an SES provider by the Maryland State Department of Education. She's going to talk about her experience there. And then last but not least, my colleague Jack Klink, who's director of the Office of Non-Public Education, which is part of the Office of Innovation and Improvement at the department, is going to talk a little bit about what we've done to try to make clear how faith-based and community organizations can be involved as SES providers at the state level. And the Office of Non-Public Education is the liaison for the department to the non-public school community. Jack has worked on issues affecting non-public education and school choice for 25 years at the department in various capacities. And this is a little bit of a homecoming for him because he also, during the Reagan administration, worked in the White House Office of Policy Development on school choice issues right here in this building. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Harris.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and great to be with Sham and to be with Rick and all the guys that helped put this together. I was so impressed to be at their office. It was so clean and so well put together. I saw them scurrying putting things together, and I told them, I said, well, if they're paying you too much around here, please see me because I've got connections. But it's just really good to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share about the success of the SES program, a program that I really am in hopes that will continue and that we're really excited about. I'm particularly impassioned about this program, and because of two life-changing experiences that sort of embolden the kind of work that we're doing in South Central Los Angeles. Two experiences that radically changed my life. My whole paradigm of ministry shifted. I'm classically changed in ministry, but after these two experiences just changed my life. One was I was caught in the crossfire of a drive-by shooting. And I'll tell you, nothing can change your life more than a good old drive-by shooting in the morning, where my wife is screaming and I'm screaming, and we're looking at these kids that are 14 and 15 and 16 years old with guns, and they're pointing them at each other, and you think to yourself, what goes on in the life of a kid, their educational experience, their life experience, where a kid wakes up in the morning, puts his clothes on, loads a gun, and wants to go out and kill somebody. The second experience that radically changed my life, that emboldens the work that I do now and that we do with our staff, is preaching funerals of kids that were not as fortunate as my wife and I to walk away from that drive-by shooting. And when you go through an experience like that and you're preaching a funeral of a child and you're watching a mother draped over a casket of her child, the one thing that goes over and over in your mind is that it didn't have to end this way. And what happens, as Langston Hughes once said, what happens to a dream deferred? So when you're looking at that picture, suddenly we begin to bump into forces that we begin to realize, just as we are realizing with the success of our SES program, is that the kids' success or even their demise does not exist in a vacuum. But there are forces, there are life forces that these kids are confronted with. I once heard a message at Fuller Theological Seminary where we talked about the idea, and I'd like to share this idea with you in terms of our success, and that is the idea of redeeming a difficult hope. Because when we look at hope, hope is something that requires an integration of support systems around these kids. In other words, SES, and what we've discovered with the SES program, the success of our program, is the fact that it stands not alone. It stands with the cooperation and the networking of community wrapping itself around it as a safety net. What we also find is that if hope is deferred, if hope does collapse, it's because of the collapse of support systems, of the collapse of family, the collapse of school, the collapse of church, lacking the capacity to respond to these kids. And what we're discovering is that education is an aspect of the total success of these lives. So that when our SES program goes into the community, the reason why our program can have success is because we're linking our arms with other community providers, we're linking our arms with other support services, and we're doing what we call wraparound. And also because there are those that would like to, the idea that this program, it just cannot escape partisan politics. There are going to be people that are going to take pot shots at the program. And one way that you can kind of diffuse people taking pot shots at the program is to be able to link yourself with a big brother or big sister in the community to where your program is successful because they're helping you, and their program is successful because you're helping them. And when people are trying to take a pot shot at your program, people around you are linking their arms with you and says, no, don't mess with this program because it's a part of our success. It's a part of our children's success. It's a part of the community's success. And the one thing that's been great about the SES program is that it lends itself so well to this idea of community working together. And the one thing that we realize about working with our kids, particularly at-risk kids, is that if you sit down and you're tutoring with a child, you'll eventually begin to run into and bump into other problems that require other support systems in place. So what it's done for us is that it's helped us to get to know the community. It's helped us to provide other services. And so our denomination, I'm a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Our denomination, it caught fire with them because we began to see that there were people within our churches that weren't being mobilized, and that the church was a sleeping giant sitting in our community that had facilities, that had people that were certified teachers. There were retired administrators that were in our congregations that were just waiting to be asked to help. And that many churches wanted to solve the problems. The question, Bishop, was this, is that many churches just didn't know how to. They didn't have a model. Somebody was not there helping to walk them through the paces of actually helping them to establish a program. So what we did was, as a result of creating this demand within our denomination, was we created training for our tutors so that we knew how to recruit kids into the program. We helped to get them certified, and we worked very closely with the state. We worked very closely with our school districts so that we were a friendly partner within our community versus being viewed as an adversary or being viewed as a competitor. And for small organizations, particularly when you're looking at money, that can be lethal. And so you want to be able to know how to come into community and establish yourself as a partner. I've got 1 minute, so you're messing with a preacher. last but not least, because of our relationship with the community, we've networked with, I got the big zero also, Bishop, so don't feel bad. At least you're not ringing a gong or pulling my neck with a cane. But last but not least, let me say this, that our community network, we're working with the Compton Watts Coalition, we're working with our denomination, we're working with several other SES providers. And our success is based upon the fact that a child must exist, or a child does exist, in a much broader context of community. And as a result of that, our program is best successful when viewed as a partner within the community.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Ms. Dowd.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Eileen Dowd, and I serve as Executive Director of Mrs. Dowd's Teaching Service. Thank you, Mr. Hine, for this privileged invitation. Welcome, Bishop Laurie, Moderator Brown, my colleagues, panelists, and distinguished attendees. Today I'm going to talk about Mrs. Dowd's Teaching Service on the schools that we served in Maryland in both Prince George's County and Harford County. We're kind of the local folks. We live 8 miles from the White House. We are nestled in Prince George's County in Berwyn Heights, Maryland. And so the very most important thing when we became providers in 2005, we had to ask ourselves the question, how could we, as Dr. Harris said, come alongside the schools and help them make AYP, which is adequate yearly progress. Now, this is very important because the schools, in order to stay off the school improvement list, each year have to make gains in math and reading. And there are schools that obviously, as SES providers, we get to go into. So in Prince George's County this year alone, we worked with 3 schools, we tutored the children, and they made AYP. And in fact, it was the 2nd year in a row for Bladensburg Elementary School, Riverdale, and Cool Spring, and they're now off the state watch list. So we're really excited for them. And one innovative way that we reached was, of course, mainly the 3 schools were heavily Latino populations. So a very good friend of mine, Senora Mata, said, let's form Team Espanol. So we hired, and we love the fact that we had many Hispanic teachers that went into the schools, talked to the parents, wrote the flyers in Spanish, and really convinced them to give us a try. So the question then becomes, why would they try us? Here's the model that we provided. The model is that we have 1 teacher for 3 students. That's pretty neat. It's like an intimate, close family setting. But here's important, and I think it's important to know that as a provider, there are some things that you may charge the state for. 1 hour of math, 1 hour of reading. But we gave the children something else. When they would come in, it was like they were coming home to us. We had them wash their hands, we gave them a snack. We then had table talk time with our teachers and the kids. How was your day? How did things go? This enabled the teacher then to kind of gauge what kind of group setting we were going to have as we were going over the math and then the reading. The second thing we did was we gave them a break between math and reading and another snack. And that really made a difference. Little things like that, the little tipping point, that we didn't charge anyone for, comes out of the compassion that we have as a faith-based company. Just one more thought. Harford County had 1 more school left on the watch list. We worked with them, and they made AYP. So that was kind of exciting. How then did we grow? Did we grow quickly? I think I'll tell you. In the summer of 2005, we had 1 school, and 200 students. We were given the go-ahead by the principal to enroll talk to the parents. So we would go after school, before school, in the parking lots. We made homemade cookies. We would have brought homemade juice if it would have helped. Anything. I mean, we had a shoestring budget. You don't get paid until you serve the children. So we were really on a shoestring budget. Homemade flyers, and we just said, give us a try. It's free to you. Give us a try. It worked. Then the next school year, we served 600. I think word of mouth worked. This past year, we served 900 students. And I think you and I would say that in the marketplace, that's over 1,650 students. If it wasn't a good program, best practices, good curriculum, sound knowledge, good training, the children wouldn't come. But the most important thing is that the gatekeepers would not let us in. Let's be honest here. The gatekeepers are the principals. They are the ones that, even though they say, you can come to the school, they have to also, we are not always invited to the open house or to the school fairs. But if you're a good program, the kids want it, you're invited. The other thing is that parents are the ones that sign the final form. So again, we would embrace them. We had focus groups. We offered an hour, the last hour of our SES program, 1 hour of English to Spanish-speaking families. And so they would come. The guys would come off the construction site, and they'd bring their books, and they'd have class. And then they would go with their children home. It was a neat model to see. It was really driven that way. And also, we welcomed all students. My dad was an immigrant from Europe, so I understood growing up how important education was. Okay, and I have got the 0 too. Okay, bottom line, we have served a lot of kids with compassion, the fruits of the Holy Spirit, joy, peace, goodness. We praise them and we encourage them. We get them to sign up, the parents, and then we do our job and we do it well. Thank you.
Jack.
Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you. I feel so humbled because there are people here who, when you're a bureaucrat, sometimes you feel important until you look at people who are really doing it. And you realize that, these are folks who can actually make schools work. And they don't just have the technical expertise, but they have that love and that compassion and that, whatever it is, that makes them want to make it work. And in addition to that, we're talking about working with kids who are not easy to work with. And you people are folks who have that love and that commitment and that skill, and you're able to motivate people, and I just want to say thank you very much. Our role here in the government, hopefully, is to help you do your job and try to not get in your way too much. And sometimes we like to think that we're the ones who do it, and that you're getting in our way, and it's really the other way. And thank you so much. Just to hear the people on this panel, the ones we're going to be hearing from. 17 years ago, there was a conference held in this very room called the White House Workshop on Choice in Education. And now we're having another conference in the same room. And at that time, there had not been any big choice program enacted as part of the modern era. There were a few here and there. Minnesota had something on a small scale. Iowa had something, and the lady who came to that was a lady named Polly Williams. And a man who came to that was a man named Governor Tommy Thompson. And together in Minnesota, those two people who were at this conference made choice a reality in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And that has inspired so much else. And many of you have been involved in all of those things, in particular Virginia Walden Ford and so many other people who can't even be mentioned. So thank you so much. We've made a lot of progress. When it looks like things aren't happening, just think that 17 years ago we didn't have most of what you're going to hear a little bit more about later on today. And hopefully 17 years from now, when we get together again, we'll hear about so much more in places that perhaps we never would have expected those things to happen. But again, thank you for all the work that you have done, are doing, and will do. 2 years ago, Secretary Margaret Spillings spoke to a group of private school people. They were here with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Congressional Advocacy Days. But she was really speaking to private school people in general. And she thanked them for the great work that they were doing. She made note of the fact that she herself was a mother of a daughter who was attending a Catholic school, a private school. And she made an appeal to them and to other private schools to consider getting involved with supplemental educational services. That she said, you're doing a wonderful job, you have so much to offer, and the President and I hope that you will consider becoming providers of supplemental educational services. And she said, thousands of students in your communities would benefit from the knowledge and skills of your teachers. And then she said, you can do it in a program that protects your religious freedom, because we are making this program operate in a way that protects protects your religious identity. And that's very important, because there's such a thing as a helping hand that becomes a hurting hand if it decides to control who you are once you start to participate in that. And you never want to give up your independence and your identity. That's something you can't sacrifice ever. So she made that appeal, and we were just very, very happy with the numbers of schools, Catholic and Protestant and others, that have really been taking a good look at this. Now, to be fair, for some schools, this is really not something that they feel they can do. They have other things that they're doing. It's just not something that they feel they can manage. But there are some schools that can. And we are so grateful to those schools for coming forward and becoming involved with supplemental educational services. Later the same year that the Secretary spoke 2 years ago, we and the Center for Faith-Based and Community Initiatives released this pamphlet to provide more information to private schools. It's in your packet. The following year, we released some questions and answers, which are also in your packet. These were questions that had been posed to us by the private school community. Some of them were concerned about becoming involved. What are we getting into? And what does it all mean? So these were released as well. And we have been trying to provide help to private schools that want to know whether this is a good thing for them. We try never to be kind of pushy, saying you have to do it. But we say if you do think you want to do it, we think there can be some real advantages on both sides. But we'll also kind of help you work through the difficulties. So we have done that. And I want to give thanks in particular to Bishop Lori and for his incredible team that he has put together. Bishop Lori came to see the Secretary a couple of years ago to appeal to her to have a demonstration in Bridgeport, which some of us hope will still happen within that 17-year period. And she said, we would like to do that if we can. Unfortunately, a law has to be passed first to allow that. And Bishop Lori has referred to some proposals underway right now. But she said, right now we have something, would you please consider this? And that's SES. So Bridgeport did do that. He said, I have this wonderful lady named Margaret Dames, and she's going to make it happen. And she did, with the assistance of John Cook and others. So thank you so much. The New Jersey Catholic Conference really won. And in that case, they had a lot of difficulty getting approval, because sometimes bureaucracies can make it difficult for you. But they persevered, and finally, the 5 different dioceses in New Jersey have been approved to provide services in the year coming up. Worcester, the Diocese of Worcester in Massachusetts, has also become approved to provide supplemental educational services. St. Peter the Apostle High School in New Jersey has provided services, and the Archdiocese of Santa Fe has been approved, though they haven't actually started yet. So we're grateful to all of these. And I want to say again that we are here to serve you. Our Office of Non-Public Education is just a little blip on the screen, but we like to think we're the gnat that roars, if maybe not quite as big as a mouse. And I want to recognize my colleague Maureen Dowling back there. Please feel free to come to us. We truly are here to serve you. That's our job. And if we can do it, we want to do it. And please do take advantage of the fact that we want to help you. Thank you.
Ms. Dowd, if I could, you touched on this briefly, but if you could just talk a little bit more, if I could ask a little bit of a leading question, because I think I know the answer, about what you've seen in terms of the academic impact for the students you served and the schools as well, and what the result has been from that.
2 things that are real important. One, of course, I mentioned earlier, the AYP. Working with the schools, we've kind of done a little bit of our own math working with the principals. We've asked them, could you please check the students to see the ones that we're serving, are they making progress? So I refer you again to the one I just checked with to make sure I had my numbers properly here. But in Bladensburg Elementary School, Ms. Rhonda Pitts, the principal, we were serving the students in September last year. So for 1 month in October, she did a little math and reading test that she gave the children, and she took the ones that we were serving versus just, the kids that go home at night. And it turned out that our kids had made improvement, close to 70%. So that was really important. I mean, it's a small thing, but it was a big thing to them. And again, it did make the difference. And the second thing, of course, is the AYP. As I said earlier, that if the school makes AYP 2 years in a row, we're out of a job. So I mean, it's very interesting. But then that means that the next set of principals that we work with are much more open. The barrier is not down. Not up, sorry.
And the positive experience that
Yes.
the schools have had with you as a tutor, as I understand, has led to other school districts inviting you in to be a supplemental service provider there.
Yes, that's how we got invited into Hartford County, and then Baltimore County will be going in the first time this year. Again, we do give references. I mean, because we really do want to work with the schools. We're the guest of the school, and we have I think as Dr. Harris said, we are peaceful advocates. And so when we get invited in and told we'd like you to come to the meeting and see if you could serve the children, we have to be careful because of that teacher ratio, the 1 to 3. We have to make sure that we can promise, and deliver what we promise. And so we were able to do that. Okay.
Dr. Harris, anything you want to add in terms of your experience and what you've seen in academic impact or otherwise on the students you serve?
Preparation for learning is probably key for us. There's an old saying that goes, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And what we found is that these kids are eager to learn. It's the path of learning. It's the preparation for learning that's been very critical. That as an SES provider, I think it's important for us to be linked with the community in ways that when we start bumping into other needs that these children have, that we are in a much better position to be able to look at this child. In other words, if we're able to teach the student, we are better able to teach the subject, which means that we have to make sure that we touch the humanity of this child. And what it does, by touching the humanity of this child, we then can introduce them to the humanity of the subject.
That's great. We have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience, or are we doing on time? I'll take, okay, great. I see 2 people ready to go, so we'll take these 2. Oh, go ahead.
I'm Bob Seidel with Communities in Schools, the nation's largest dropout prevention organization. And my question, it really is inspired by what Dr. Harris said about the linked arms and of the community-based organizations and providing wraparound services to schools. And I guess it's a question about whether supplemental educational services, which focus on tutoring, could be expanded in some way to support the whole range of services that students need in order to succeed in school, whether it's healthcare, after-school programs, whatever it is.
The way that we have responded to that is by calling community into accountability for those services, so that if we're a contract agency also with not only with the school district to provide SES services, but we're also a contract agency with Los Angeles County as lead agency to provide family preservation services. So what we do is that instead of just burdening the SES program with and even though we could be more comprehensive, that what we've discovered by engaging the community, that there is that comprehensive support systems in the community that we're now calling into accountability. So we're working very closely with the probation department, working very closely with other job training programs, with other support systems. And what it also does, it helps to perceive the program better as a partner versus a program that's coming in to try to do it all. And when you're calling on other community partners to link arms with you, you stand a better chance of their linking arms with you.
Very, very briefly in answer, please do follow up with Sham or someone else from the Department of Education's Faith-Based and Community Initiative Office, because there are a number of examples where organizations, although the SES funds are restricted to the tutoring, the academic program, where you could link up either with other education programs that, like the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant program, or there's examples of other organizations that have linked it up with state or local funds so that it's seamless to the child, but you're bringing in several different funding streams. I apologize, I'm going to have to limit it to 1 question because I know we're behind schedule, but thank you very much to our first panel.
Bless you.
I'm Charles Hokinson. I'm president of the Alliance for School Choice, based in Washington, D.C. And our organization is the leading national organization supporting the design, implementation, expansion, and protection of targeted K-12 school choice programs. I mention that specifically because our first program, our first panel, was focused on NCLB and the federal program of SES. Our third panel is going to be focused on the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, also federally funded. Most of the activity that's out there in school choice these days, most of the innovation, is coming at the state level, at the local level. And our organization is very involved in at the national, state, and local level at developing a group of allies who work together to pass legislation both in the form of vouchers or opportunity scholarships, sometimes statewide, sometimes for targeted groups such as students with disabilities, students with foster kids, students of military veterans. So there's a wide range of interests that we're getting out there. Lots of innovation going on and creative thinking about how we can better serve students who are disadvantaged in the urban cities and elsewhere around the country. We also are very involved in passing tax credit bills around the country. Sometimes individual tax credits, sometimes corporate tax credits. We have an example of one of those tax credit programs, one of the schools that's involved in one of those tax credit programs on this panel. We also have a principal of one of the voucher schools from Milwaukee on this panel. I wanted to essentially sort of set the framework by basically giving an example of what's happened in terms of achievement in Milwaukee as a specific example. Milwaukee was the first voucher program. We heard in the first panel that Polly Williams and Governor Thompson had been instrumental in passing that program. It started off with 341 students. It now has about 19,000 students involved in it. It's the oldest of the programs. We're studying it. We have a national study that's a sort of gold ribbon study that's going on over a number of years to figure out what's happening in that community, what kind of achievement gains have there been. A couple of the results I just wanted to mention of that program to give an example. We found out that school choice improves graduation rates. So as we talk about improving the achievement gap, there's no better proxy for improved prospects in life than has this child graduated from high school. And getting a voucher, getting a scholarship, getting a tax credit, being able to move on into these other better schools is one way we can help those students do that. We found that through Jay Green's study in Milwaukee that 64% of the children who are involved in the Milwaukee voucher program are graduating from high school compared to 36% in the Milwaukee public schools. Vast difference. We're also finding public school improvement as Carolyn Hawksby at Harvard has found out that as public schools with large enrollments of low-income students eligible for choice start to see what's happening, the public schools are looking to figure out why are other students choosing other schools. So there's a lot of innovative cross sort of looking between the public sector, private sector, and those schools. This is a great opportunity for faith-based organizations to get involved in terms of starting schools. Getting involved in improving the aspects of their community. I don't want to spend any more time on sort of school choice national. I'll be happy to answer questions. Our speakers today, panelists, are Steve Robertson, who's a principal at Destiny High School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So he's directly involved with the Milwaukee Voucher Program. And Seth Cohen, the headmaster at Spruce Hill Christian School in Philadelphia, who's directly involved with the Pennsylvania Corporate Scholarship Tax Program. So I will turn it over to you gentlemen with Steve Robertson going first.
Thank you. Christian Faith Fellowship Church, Bishop Darrell and Pastor Pamela Hines established a number of different things. Really had a mission for uplifting families and positively affecting our community. So the church actually established a charter, DLH Academy, Darrell and Hines Academy of Excellence, a public charter in 1999. They currently have about 300 students. They're independent. They're funded through the state, but their agency they report to the city of Milwaukee. We also have SES, we're SES providers, Project Star, Saving Teens at Risk. And we've been in serving a provider for 4 years, over 4 years. Have a chance to see several of our students go to college and have some terrible situations, but really rise above, even with the ACT and helping them with ACT and tutoring and helping them prepare for those tests and really see their scores rise, but I don't have time. Also, Carol White, we were a Carol White PEP grant recipient. 3rd year, we serve over 500 high schoolers, middle and high school students, nutritional wellness and wholeness grant after school program. And then we also have a Destiny Youth Plaza, and inside of that plaza, it's a Destiny High School, which is a small high school, a private high school that operates in the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. That is an early college identification model school with also pathways, career development pathways in communication, media, as also with technology. We work really hard with about 96% of our students in Destiny High School. Last year we had 115. That was the first year of our operation of our high school. And this year we're on track to have about 175 to 200 students in our 9th, 10th, and 11th grades next year. So I know you talked about a little bit about the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, but just in case you didn't know, it's actually the per pupil cost is like $6,500 for last year. That's the initial family income for not to exceed 175% of poverty. The parents have a voucher to choose what school they want their children to go to. We play by the rules with our SES, with our Carol White, with our Carol White, SES, our charter school, and when the opportunity really to come along to actually go into our high school, we wanted it to be a thoroughly Christian school, to be able to integrate our values and our core beliefs. Now, in Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, the student have the right to opt out. But, up until now, nobody's opted out of our school because it's upfront that we're a private Christian high school. We believe that God has a purpose and a plan for everybody's life. And we want to help the young person figure out where they're at right now and where they're going and help them to get there. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here. I'm representing Spruce Hill Christian School, and we participate in the Education Improvement Tax Credit, which is a business tax credit program in the state of Philadelphia. I'd like to begin with a quote from former Secretary of Education Rod Page. He said this in a speech: "It is unacceptable to waste a child's life, to treat a child as unimportant or marginal, or to simply pretend the child is invisible. Who among us would condemn a child to an inferior education? Which child? Whose child?" As horrible of a question that is, whose child? Which child? We have a tragic answer for that in the city of Philadelphia, which is similar to other cities. Whose child? Which child? It's the poor children. It's the children who are forced to attend a school that will fail them. What parent or grandparent, if they were given a choice, would choose to send their child to a school where the majority of the children will not perform at grade level? If they're given a choice, they would simply move. They would look for another school district. That would require, of course, a higher mortgage, higher taxes. And if they don't do that, then they'll pursue a private education. They'll call the schools and find out what options are there for them. My little school will have 20 or 25 openings in the new admissions year. At Spruce Hill, we'll receive 7, 8, 900 admissions phone calls for 20 seats. These are parents who really care about where their children are going to go. When they call, they begin almost every conversation with the same question. They don't ask me what is the average teaching experience of my staff. They don't ask me what the average classroom size is. They don't even ask test scores. They ask, what is the tuition? It's a simple question. Certainly you have bigger questions than that. You should be asking other things. But what is the tuition? But that question is actually a little bit more complicated. The question is really like this: Seth, can I afford your school and keep a roof over my family's head? Can I afford your school and provide food for my children? Can I provide heating in the winter? Because PGW will shut me down in February if I don't pay. And so we get these calls. Can I provide the decent education? 10 years ago, when I started at Spruce Hill, we made a decision we were going to enroll a child regardless of their ability to pay. It was just going to be as simple as that. And that required us to raise a lot of money. We're just going to raise money to make this happen. And when you compare it to the lives of the children, it's really inconsequential. I cannot tell you what it's like to sit across from a grandmother of 2 who has applied to your school, facing a $9,000 tuition for 2 children, and I let her know that we can make this happen. It's going to cost her $400 a year or $40 a month. The rest of the scholarship has been taken care of. A single mother, fully employed, working below the poverty level, also attending school nearly full-time for her to try to get her nursing degree. 3 children, 2 in daycare. What can she afford to provide her child in kindergarten? We have the scholarship to make it happen. 5 years ago, when the Education Improvement Tax Credit came along, this was a huge blessing to our school because we had a new source to pursue these kinds of scholarships. We were able to raise large amounts of money from wonderful corporations like Her Foods, they make potato chips, and Stillman Volvo, and little companies here and there, some sending $70, some sending $70,000. But their business taxes, instead of going to Harrisburg, end up at Spruce Hill in the form of scholarship for children who otherwise would be forced to attend a school that would not educate them properly. So it's been a great program, and that'll be it.
Okay. I'm going to start off with the first question. We have school choice programs, whether vouchers or tuition tax credits, either implemented or implementing for the first time this fall in 9 states. Last year there was 136,000 children in these programs, $466 million of public funds from the state and federal government that were being implemented towards these private options. What advice would you give to faith-based organizations, churches who might be wanting to either start schools or who currently have a school about how to get involved, and what should they be looking out for if they're in one of the states that have these programs available?
Yes, you want to start with me?
So we'll start with you, review.
One of the challenges for starting off a school, and there are nearly 100 Christian schools in the city of Philadelphia. Some of them are very small, some of them are larger, but their success is really linked in their ability to raise money. And the challenge for starting a school is you have to have a plan to exist on more than $1,800 in tuition. You want to keep the tuition affordable, but you have to have a business plan, and you have to access funds, whether it's through some type of school choice or a tax credit, or through philanthropic efforts. You have to have a business plan. You just can't do it on $2,000 a child, because you have to run an extraordinary school to meet the needs of children who have been undereducated for sometimes years and years.
I also would add that you need to do your homework. You know, there's a lot of resources out here. As we planned and thought about, before you actually build a building, you want to count the cost of how much it's going to take and the commitment and the level of commitment. But it's doable. We also received a grant from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to do a small high school redesign program. So we was able to there's state dollars sometimes for charter schools. So there's a lot of different resources out here that you may help you in your quest to educate young people. But it starts with counting the costs, working hard, playing by the rules, making connections, networking, the whole 9 yards. But it's doable. So I would encourage if you're in the organization or in the state that have programs out there, I would encourage you to investigate. I would encourage you to look at special, model schools that's out doing it. While we're out thinking about a school and wanting to dream and our vision, we went to go see some schools. We went to out to High Tech High in California. We went to the School of Performing Arts in Minnesota. We went to several schools. We actually started to talk to people that was actually doing it. So which really helped us.
If any of you are in a state and you're not sure if it has a choice program, please contact the Alliance for School Choice. We'd be happy to let you know what's available in your state or how you can join us as rabble-rousers in getting a program in your state. Do we have time for a couple other questions? One more question. Right there.
Maureen Weeby with American Association of Christian Schools. Thank you for what you all are doing. I have a question for Seth. Came in today. You also have a flyer in your packet that advertises this report and provides a link to it. It will be live on our website today, and what it does is describe the programs that you just heard about in Pennsylvania and in Milwaukee, and all of the other voucher and tax credit programs that are currently operating in the states and in DC. And you'll find very simple descriptions of the programs, the amounts that the scholarships are provided for, statutory links, everything that you need to know on the basics, and then go contact the Alliance for School Choice when you want to make it happen in your state. So we hope that that's a helpful resource for you. Our final panel is going to talk to you a bit about the history, the parent advocacy role, and the school's perspective on the implementation of the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. The DC Choice Program is one of those school choice options that the Office of Innovation and Improvement is proud to support, and it's focused on bringing choices to low-income parents in our nation's capital. It began back in 2004. It's a fairly new program in the scheme of things, but it's already serving 1,800 students in 58 participating schools. And it's a program that offers a larger scholarship as compared to some of the other programs, in part because of the high cost of educating students in the district. Students can receive scholarships for up to $7,500, and that includes tuition, fees, and transportation costs that can be covered. We might hear a little bit about the evaluation component to the program that was included in the legislation. It's actually a very big part of implementing the program. And a third report was released recently from the Institute for Education Sciences that is conducting the evaluation of this program. And that report provided confirmation of what we knew, and that's parents are quite happy with the education options that they're receiving under this program. You'll get to hear from Virginia Walden Ford, who is quite a star and quite well known in the school choice arena. I know many of you know her and know her amazing accomplishments. She's wears many hats, as do all of our panelists. And she's one of the founding members for the Black Alliance for Educational Options and currently the president of DC BAO. She also serves as executive director for DC Parents for School Choice, and all of her involvement, as she'll tell you, kind of comes from her own experience as a parent of a child who ended up receiving a scholarship and attending Archbishop Carroll High School. You'll then hear from Sally Sacker, who is in transition from previously she's been the executive director of the president and CEO of the Washington Scholarship Fund, which is the 501c3, the nonprofit that runs the DC Opportunity Scholarship Fund. And she's transitioning over to a new role, Chief of Staff of DC Children First, an entity that's being started to advocate for the continued life and future of the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. And third, you'll hear from Chris Kelly, who brings a really unique and important perspective, and that's the perspective of the schools. We talk a lot about parents, but it's extremely important to also hear from the schools as we have been today. And as you already know, he is involved with the Center City Consortium, leads it up as executive director, and previously was a principal at Assumption Catholic School in the district. I'll turn it over to Ginny.
Thank you, Jenny. And I'm really delighted to be here. I was really pleased to be invited to share kind of the parent perspective. Oftentimes, we forget that without the outcry of parents, probably none of us would be even talking about this issue. In February of 2000, well, let me tell you a little bit about me. My son got a scholarship to attend any private school I chose from a neighbor. And it was such a wonderful outcome for our family. It just turned his life around. He was in an environment that was safe and where he felt like he could really learn and people cared about whether he learned or not. As a result of how wonderful that was for our family, I felt compelled to speak on behalf of parents that nobody ever hears from. These are parents that are oftentimes afraid to speak out or don't have any opportunity to speak out or don't even think they have the right to speak out about their children. And I was really blessed with the ability to be able to articulate my views on their behalf. In 2003, with a president that was certainly supportive of school choice and a Republican Congress that was supportive of school choice, we were called upon in D.C. to organize parents. Interestingly enough, that first meeting, the group of 25 organizations was saying, well, is it the right time? Is it the right time? And turned to me. I had been running an organization that supported charter school parents, and turned to me and said, can you organize parents in D.C. to support vouchers? And I said, absolutely. And then I went home and went, what have you said? I don't know if I can organize parents. But I started calling parents and going out into the community and visiting with parents. And these were low-income parents that were often not heard. So the response was incredible, and people really welcomed me in because they wanted to talk about their children and they wanted to talk about what was going on. And they offered to do whatever was necessary to make something happen for their children who were in schools that were failing them. And it was just wonderful. I mean, we have press conferences and parents would actually show up, and I got more and more confident that I could do this, and the parents got more and more empowered. I often talk about how sometimes I'd stand back and watch parents talk to the press after a period of time and hear them talk about their children and what they wanted for their children and how important this legislation was and how it would give them an opportunity to choose schools that would work for their children, and no longer would they feel hopeless and helpless and pushed against the wall. And, I feel like this proud mother that I had something to do with their being able to do that. But what I did was told them they could do it. It gave them the right to stand up and speak for their kids. So in the course of the legislative effort, which lasted all of 2003, we took parents to Capitol Hill every day for 11 months, groups and groups of parents. So about 3,000 parents were eventually involved in our program. And, they really made me out not to be a liar. So, I did organize parents. And they really made a difference. Congress has often told me through the last few years that we had a wonderful, first you must know, we had a wonderful group of people involved in the D.C. effort. Policy folk, lobbyists, just wonderful people. We all worked together very, very well. And, but Congress has said to me, all these folk were great, but the icing on the cake were parents that were willing to stand up and say, I want something different for my child. Listen to me, And that courage was just incredible. Oh, God, I'm a zero. And I can't talk 7 minutes. Okay, so anyway, it was really successful, and parents, in D.C. became empowered. They became true advocates for their children. Currently, and I'm going to say the truth, currently we are doing this again. We are getting ready to fight for the reauthorization of our scholarship program, which is a part of a 3-sector program. So, and And again, we are organizing parents, we're identifying parents, we're building our army, and we will win because we're on the right side. Howard Fuller tells us that all the time. We are on the right side, so we will win. I've worked for the last year. See, we worked this out. I worked for the last year with Washington Scholarship Fund as a partner to support Sally and her wonderful staff in their efforts to administer the program. We helped support what we thought was going to be a support group, which has become an information group for parents as they transition from public school to private school. We also, along with my team, actually my team is back there, my sister who looks just like me, so if you see her, that's my twin sister who works on my staff, and Brian McManus, who I don't know where he went. We go out in the community and conduct application meetings on Washington Scholarship Fund's behalf. And I think we did, there's Brian back there, and we did about 218 meetings. That's how committed we are. That's what it takes. If you got to be willing to go out and beat the pavement. In the life of the program, we've done it. We are currently scheduling 20 meetings a week. We have hit every corner of the city, and we're going to hit them again. Because we want parents to have the opportunity to be a part of this. This is a wonderful program. Kids are safe. You know, kids in schools, we hear wonderful stories that I can't tell right now because I don't have enough time. And it's incredible. So Sal's going to tell you a little bit more. Thank you.
I think Virginia is the only person I've ever heard talk about the program who underestimated the number of years. It's been 3.5 years, not one. Usually we feel like it's been at least a decade. We always talk about dog years over at the Washington Scholarship Fund. I'm really happy to participate in this panel today and have been so inspired by the other panelists who preceded us and by Virginia, both Virginias, Chris Kelly. We were talking about earlier on, and if we were to sort of sit in a room, the people who were responsible for the launch of this program at the very beginning, certainly these two would have taken up a lot of the room because they made such important contributions. And we really would not have 1,800 kids have enrolled last fall were it not for Virginia and Chris and Patty Whiteslow Neal and other school heads and all the parents around town who signed up to participate. We've been through a lot together, Virginia, Chris, and the rest of us. We've shared some great times and some very hard times, some celebrations and defeats, times where our path was very clear and times where it was muddled, where we fought, got mad at each other, made up, gave each other hugs, and we're ready to go at it again. As Ginny said, Virginia Gentle said, I'm no longer at WSF. The wonderful team led by Greg and Jen back in the room are running the program now, and it really is on their shoulders to make sure that the program continues to be a great success, because without that, we have no hope of its continuation. And it's because of the great work that they've done and that they've done with the partners sitting by my sides and others who are not here that we have had such a successful run here in Washington. So I'm happy that I now get to work at an advocacy organization where I get to be brutally honest about things, things you can't say at a 501c3, but you do get to at a 501c4. So I'll have a few of those comments at the end. I also just want to quickly thank some of our funders who are sitting here in the room, the Alliance for School Choice, Advocates for School Choice, and of course the Department of Education and the White House, who've been just great partners, comrades, just wonderful moral support, in addition to some money across the past 4 years. And many of our education partners are here with us today. I was asked to speak about the launch of the program, and I thought the best way to do that really was to sort of talk about what was in kind of our hearts and minds when we launched this back 3.5 years ago. We very much thought of it as launching a program. It wasn't ideological. It never occurred to us actually to be ideological. And I don't know whether that's because none of us had really been involved in choice before. I, for example, came from the National Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, where I had seen what happens to a mom when she becomes pregnant too early, and how the lack of education or the lack of seeing a positive path for a child contributes to too early parenthood, and it becomes this vicious cycle. And so for us, it was about launching a program, doing it as well as we possibly could. And as Virginia said when we were sitting here talking earlier on, it was all about forming partnerships, not just for the sake of it. We didn't just sort of say, oh, let's go stand arm in arm with a bunch of people that sound good. It was, what can we do with the Washington Scholarship Fund that's consistent with our mission? And we didn't want to get into kind of mission drift. Some of our funders said, don't you dare try to do things you're not good at. There's other people in the community that can do those things. That's where we immediately lined up with Virginia, obviously with the schools, with the Greater Washington Urban League, in part because we were trying to change the conversation here in Washington. We sought partners who had never been involved in choice, but who were committed to education and to youth. And we very prominently featured their involvement in the program. Some of the qualities I think that embodied this program and have defined it from the beginning, one is resilience. And I think any of us who've worked with kids feel that resilience is really at the core. I remember a conversation I had with a friend of mine who grew up in probably one of the grimmest sections of urban Detroit, who had a sibling die of AIDS, another sibling who's homeless. And I said to him, and he's a journalist for NPR now, pretty prominent prize-winning journalist. And I said, what was sort of the key to your success? And he said two things, resilience and having a mentor. And I think resilience has been really important for the team, not just at WSF, but really the whole community that's been involved in the launch. Also just an unabiding belief that what we were doing was the right thing. And I think you can withstand the grueling scrutiny and the politics when you believe that that you're on the side of the angels and the other guys are bad. And I'm a nice person. I don't like conflict, as Jen and Greg will tell you, but we were driven every day by knowing that what we were doing was right. Also, it was really important for us that this program here in Washington was a partnership with the city, with a Democratic mayor and with the Republican Bush administration. So while we didn't lead with politics and tried, while not being naive, to be as apolitical as possible, it mattered a great deal that it had come about as a result of a coalition that was bipartisan, that was included many city leaders, and that embodied business leaders, religious leaders, educators, families, and others. I'm at 0, so I have to stop, but I want to say one thing, which is that, and this is maybe something you get to say when you work at a 501c4, which is that I would say the one challenge that this program has, it's not about academic achievement, it's not about parent satisfaction, it's not about motivation, determination on the part of a single person involved, it's about politics. And if this program is not given a chance to ripen like the one in Milwaukee has been, it's going to be for one reason, and that's politics. So what we all have to do is what Virginia said, which is to have our families be the voice, the kids, the educators, the people who are interacting with our families day in and day out, because for them it is absolutely not about politics. So that's what we're going to try to do, and if we lose, it's not going to be on content, and as Virginia said, we're going to win. So.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here to talk about this program that has been the greater part of my life for a number of years. Brief history, I was at Assumption School when the Center City Consortium was formed. I was the principal there, and so I knew that the Center City Consortium is, quick sketch, 12 inner city schools that serve the disenfranchised in the city. They're Catholic schools that have been here for quite a while, and they were put together to avoid, as Bishop Laurie said, closing down some of the schools. So I knew the strength of the consortium, the strength of our organization. I also have been working, Washington Scholarship Fund existed previous to this for private scholarships, and for a number of years Assumption School was one of the primary recipients. We had some of the highest numbers of students that were receiving the private scholarships through the Washington Scholarship Fund, so I was aware of their organization. And when this opportunity, the DCOS opportunity, came up, and Washington Scholarship Fund was chosen as the third-party provider, I was comfortable with their organization and knew they could provide the management and operation piece to this. I was also confident and comfortable with our organization and the fact that we could assimilate these students into our schools and make this program work. There's a famous, well, I don't know how famous it is, there's a quote by Bonnie Raitt that says, "Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous." And I don't think it was a coincidence that the Washington Scholarship Fund existed and the Center City Consortium existed when this program was implemented, because I firmly believe that it never could have happened without those two organizations working together. I sort of became a linchpin because I knew the two organizations. It was a struggle. There was a large number of students to go through the lotteries, to be identified, to be placed. It was a lot of work between the Washington Scholarship Fund, parents groups, our schools. To give you an idea of the level that we serve, in 04-05 we had 477 of the Opportunity Scholarship students. 05-06 we had 750. 06-07 we went up to 789, and this year we're projecting probably a little over 800 in our schools. So we serve the majority of the students that are in this program. The good news is that we had the slots available because our enrollment was low, and we felt that it was a mission to serve the same population that we had served forever. It's the mission of the Catholic Church to educate children in the city. It's one of the missions of the church. The unfortunate thing is that our consortium board had decided the same thing that Bishop Lurie's board had decided, is that the parents that we serve can't afford the true cost of educating the children. So we had frozen our tuition at $3,500. That's the sticking point, because the way the legislation was written, we can only collect $3,500. We were sort of, it was a catch-22. We were trapped by our own efforts to serve these people. We were still able to do it. We made a commitment to find the funding, but for every child that we took in, we have to find additional funding. So it wasn't an answer in the financial sense. It was an answer for a number of these children in these communities because it gave them an option that they didn't have before. The impact on the schools, one of the things that people would ask about, I think, is how this large number, 800 plus students coming into our schools, affected our schools, and my answer would be that I defy anyone to walk into our schools and say how they're different today than they were in the past. One of the panelists mentioned before the tricky part of not having people interfere with what you're doing but allowing you to do what you do. Our screening process has stayed the same, our culture stays the same, our academic standards stay the same. For the past, since 2000, before this inception of this program, we've tracked our academic standards closely in the consortium. We've seen an increase in reading scores, math scores, and language arts scores every year, and that includes the years that we're assimilating these students. So it has not had a negative impact on the academic standards. It has not had a negative impact on the culture. Our schools are still the same schools that they were before, and I think sometimes people fear that you've got to change who you are for a program like this. We haven't changed a thing. We've just been able to serve more students. A quick sort of reflection back, we were able to do it because of the Washington Scholarship Fund, because of a united parent group. She talked about how united. And because of the Center City Consortium. I don't think that a program could be implemented at this scale, this quickly, in other urban settings. So I would suggest that maybe a slow, if it gets expanded, a slower implementation. I think you work with younger students. That doesn't mean I don't care about older students, but if we can get the younger students in and sort of bring them along with the program, it gives the schools a chance to get used to it. It gives whatever the third-party provider is a chance to get used to it, because there were a lot of struggles, even with Washington Scholarship Fund, knowing the community and the parents, and it's not just fill out a form, it's several phone calls and a lot of hand-holding and a lot of working through it. So I think, and of course the big nut that you have to crack is getting it to the point where it helps solve some of the financial issues of the school. It's got to be linked to what it costs to educate a child, rather than what you're keeping your tuition artificially low. You shouldn't be penalized for trying to serve communities that way.
Quick point of clarification, and then I think we'll try to squeeze in a question or two. You've been hearing a bit about efforts to advocate for the reauthorization, which is a DC term that we use for renewing the legislation that introduced the DC program. The program needs to be reauthorized next year, and folks are, as you can tell, gearing up for that. You've heard a number of folks allude to the potential expansion of the Opportunity Scholarship Program, and that was part of the President's budget. It's something that was also part of the No Child Left Behind reauthorization proposals that the administration has put forth. The idea is to take this model of an Opportunity Scholarship Program that's currently federally funded in DC, take it on the road and see if other cities would want to operate similar programs. And that's something that would have to make its way through Congress, but something that we're quite supportive of. I'd like to open it up to one or two quick questions.
My name is Harrison Boyd. I'm here from the District of Columbia, and I represent small business. One of the questions I'd like to ask is, with a program like the Opportunity Scholarship Program, and I apologize, I'm not that familiar with the program, does that program allow for, as you were talking about, directed scholarships along with general scholarships, or is it, or if a small business were to invest in a program like that, would the funds all be dedicated towards a general scholarship initiative?
You know, this particular scholarship fund, and Sally probably can even tell you more about it, but we know that there was not a lot allocated to administer the program. So the investment that we're looking for from businesses would go to the kids or to the families in order to ensure that they are successful in the program. For example, some of the schools charge more tuition than what the scholarship program is. So we try to help with uniforms, transportation, after school care, enrichment programs, anything that would ensure the success that the child will be successful in this program. What we know is that kids coming from public schools come in at a handicap, and they go into private schools at a handicap. And we want to make sure that we bring them up to where they need to be so they can be successful in these schools. The schools have been extraordinary. The Center City Consortium schools have been incredible. And so those are some of the kinds of resources that would be really, really helpful in a program of this size.
And I'll just quickly add to that there's, for a business such as yours, there's two ways that you can support the organization. One is that you can make contributions, and I'm sure that the team from WSF would be happy to talk with you. I'm sure they'll come find you as soon as the meeting's over. I can already see them kind of figuring out how to get to your path. To support a privately funded scholarship program that the organization runs in addition to this federally funded one. Also, if you were interested in doing what Virginia said, which is to provide funds to help support the kids who are in the federally funded program, there's all sorts of opportunities to give there too.
And there are also lots of opportunities to give to the organization that's helping fight the reauthorization. So, you know, we have to make sure that we organize parents and find those kind of resources. We are, a private nonprofit organization who gives with our hearts. So the business community in Washington could certainly be investing in a great thing by investing in making sure that this program stays in existence. We don't want to put 1,800 kids out of schools. We don't want 66 private schools to have to figure out a way to continue to educate our kids who are doing so well. So, so this is a big part of it as well. And actually, I'm gonna make my way over there. I could beat them.
Question from the back.
Dale McDonald, National Catholic Educational Association. Sally, I do agree that the political piece is really significant, but I think the achievement piece too has to be there. And this year was the first year of the program. I think we need to have some way that the evaluations come out closer to the reauthorization piece. But year 3 is probably going to show some significant gains. We can't wait until after the bill is reauthorized to have those results. First year is almost invalid in a sense, but what about year 2 and year 3, and when are we going to find those results out?
You're exactly right. Academic achievement and parent satisfaction are necessary but not sufficient is what I should say. Without a successful program, forget reauthorization, but we have to build on that in terms of the politics. In terms of the evaluation, hear ye. You're absolutely right that it's very unfortunate that the results that came out this summer were relating to the first year of the program, actually the first 7.5 months of the program. And we, as you may have noticed, did everything we possibly could to make sure people knew that even though we were about to start the 4th year of the program, the data reflected 7.5 months. We don't control, the Washington Scholarship Fund, DC Children First, the Center City Consortium, none of us can control the timing of when this data comes out. The next report that'll come out, which will be based on 1.5 years worth of data, will be next spring. And, as Virginia pointed out, that's right up against the timing of reauthorization. So it's not ideal. The good news is that there is data, other data that can be drawn upon, and there's also other studies. The Annie Casey Foundation funded a parent satisfaction study, and those of us who are working on reauthorization will do everything we possibly can to get data in front of policymakers, although the Big Kahuna study, the West at Georgetown that you referred to, not by name, is on a timeline that we don't control. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess maybe we need to try to advocate with ICS or somebody to get the timetable moved up.
Yeah, there's some people here in the room who may be able to do that.
Do we have time for one final question? Yes.
Hi, my name is Bill Tobin, and I'm with the National Council of Catholic Men in Northern Virginia. For the last 17 years, parents have had, low-income parents, have had the ability to choose the child care of their preference, low-income parents, through what is known as the Child Care Development Fund. It's a huge program, federal, state, $19 billion. Have you made an effort in the past, or would you be doing it now, to engage those parents who are actually using choice, parent choice, in the choice of their preschool program to become advocates so that they could continue doing the same when they are in kindergarten and first grade?
Absolutely. We have we've worked with a lot of organizations that, particularly preschool organizations, because they have been able to make a choice. I actually used to own a daycare center, so we took, we got vouchers for some of our kids, so we knew that that was a resource that we could go to. But we also work with Head Start parents. We also work with preschool parents that are in public school. And because those parents are the parents that are really looking for the future for their children. So absolutely. I think that those will probably be incredible advocates for this new effort. And because they have made a choice. 3 years ago, the parents that were a part of the effort were public school parents that had never had a choice. So this year the strategy is certainly to broaden the scope of our outreach to parents. So yes, thank you.
Well, thank you to our talented and dedicated panelists.
We are out of time. I get zeros too, so I can obey orders. We don't have more time for questions, and for that I apologize, but we did receive so much information and inspiration from each of the speakers, so for that I thank each of them for what they do day to day in giving us a synopsis here today. And again, thank you to each of you who provide influence in your own spheres of participation. We're better together, so hopefully today will be a catalyst toward better educated and better cared for children. Thank you very much. Have a good day.